Welcome to the Soul Archaeology podcast, a space for connection, resonance, witnessing, and learning. Together we'll harvest medicine from the spiral of life, sharing conversations with other embodied humans who have navigated their own initiations and found alignment with their true soul essence. With weekly astrology, energy updates, embodied conversation, and channeled teachings, this is a space for you to land and find resonance with the spiral of your own soul. Hello there, and happy Scorpio season. I certainly personally felt the shift into this season. It feels like this sort of deep dive into the dark waters of Scorpio. It's an experience I tend to resist. I personally have Pluto in Scorpio in the first house, so there's this resistance to it, but also this real inability to escape it. And once I'm in it, it feels so right and good and fortifying. But my Libra self is sort of like, why do we always have to do this? Where does the transformation end? And then I just have to remind myself that it never ends. And that's the journey of being human on this planet during this time. And so if you're also feeling that way, I see you, I feel you. But the alchemical potential and opportunity of this time is really quite profound. It's almost like the experience of swimming in the ocean in, a place where the ocean isn't warm and clear and perfect like the Mediterranean, but something more like the Pacific, the West Coast, where the waves are big and it's going to feel so good to clear your crown, to swim in the salty water, to experience that connection with nature that sometimes only the ocean can provide. But personally for myself, there's oftentimes right before just sort of this resistance to getting in. But I know when I do, while I'm in it, and then afterwards I'll feel so rejuvenated, so refreshed. But the process leading up to it is sort of like, I come up with all of these reasons as to why I don't want to do it, or why I shouldn't get wet, or, is the water clean today? And then once I'm in it, and on the other side, I truly feel like a new person. My system has been reset. My energy centers are clear. My crown is clear. I feel such a deep connection with the earth, with the mother. It's like all the weight is relieved from my shoulders. I remember I don't have to figure it all out. I remember that there is a universal force and support that is there all the time. But when I'm still sitting on the sand, or when I'm taking off my clothes, getting ready to get in, that few minutes of sort of talk or dialogue that occurs to keep me out of it, to keep me out of the transformation, to keep me out of the healing, out of the clearing, comes forward. And I feel like that's a bit what Scorpio season can feel like. We have this resistance, this truly default survival, primal resistance to going deep within our own shadow spaces. And it is related to survival. It's related to our subconscious, which would much rather see us held within the safe parameters of our conscious mind, of what we know to be familiar and quote unquote safe, consistent, dependable. But there's a part of us, this soulful part of us, that knows that we have to go into that space. We have to enter into that alchemical process or into that portal of transformation in order to evolve in a certain way. It's this evolutionary force or drive that we contain that keeps us moving through, that keeps us going into these spirals, into the descent work, into the spaces within us that need our attention, that need our love, that need our light. So we do it even though we don't want to, or sometimes we're simply forced into it. And we're there without even knowing how we got there. but we're sitting with our shadow and we're seeing these parts of ourselves that have been dark for some time, that have been rejected or hidden or suppressed. And we start to see the ways that we've used our own shadow and projected it onto others, or how we've attracted people or experiences into our lives to illuminate that shadow. And we can pour more light onto it, more compassion, more understanding. We can choose the shadow and then it transforms. And this is the descent work. This is the work of initiation. This is the work of the goddess. Like Inanna, we're asked to go within ourselves deeper and deeper each and every time to harvest more awareness, harvest more love, to witness ourselves in more authentic, honest, truthful ways. But we can't do it if we don't have the courage to go within those spaces, if we don't have the courage to dive, to enter into the uncomfortable experience of seeing ourselves clearly. And this is a bit what this time feels like. This invitation into the depths of our own being, our own psyche, our own underworld, bringing our flashlight of awareness to these spaces to see what's been hidden, to see what's been unconsciously running the show. When I think about the underworld work, when I think about the depth work and the shadow work, I think about, going down the stairs into the basement. And I don't know about you, but for me growing up, I always had this sort of primal fear going down into the basement. Every step I took, I felt like there was this pull into the darkness. And even if all the lights were on, I don't know if it was all the scary movies I watched as a kid, or if it was just this primal understanding and knowing of what that means symbolically. But if you think about it, it's like we all have our own internal basement. We all have our own underworld. And the programs and the patterns that really run our lives are tucked into these boxes. And it's really our job to go through the boxes, to do as much as we can until we get tired, until we get overwhelmed, and then come back up and integrate the knowing that we've gained, and then go back down again. And I think so much of what we see in the world today are people who are unwilling or unable to go into their own basement, to start to look through the boxes that have been stored there for years, decades, centuries, lifetimes. But this is the time. This is the time where we are asked more and more frequently, more intensely, to go deeper into ourselves, to understand our own basement before we go checking the basement of others. So this week, we are in the basement, this whole month really of November, we're in our own internal basements. And something to think about is that when you're in your own basement, it can kind of feel all-consuming. It can feel like maybe dark or dense, or like you're in a tunnel, sort of this experience of losing your guide, losing your light. This is often what I work through with people, with my clients, is where are you within the basement, within the descent work? And how can we start to intuitively choose the boxes to open? What needs your awareness right now? What needs your light, your love, your compassion? What needs your honesty and your truth? Once you open the box, you liberate yourself from the contents. The anticipation of what you're afraid of is oftentimes much stronger than the actual fear. When you open the box, you dissolve the fear. So if we think about all of our programs, our patterns, our fears, what keeps us tight and locked and stuck and stagnant within our lives are these boxes. And when we open the boxes, we can all of a sudden go through the contents and realize the contents hold so much less power than we thought they did. We become the masters of our own emotions again. We become the masters of our own fears. But until then, those fears and those programs hold power over us. So this week, we start November. November is quite an intense month, and we start it with a new moon in Scorpio on November 1st at 4:47 a.m. Pacific. So quite literally on 11/1, so November 1st, 1/11, 11/1, we have this invitation down into our own internal landscape, into our own underworld, our own basement. As we know, new moons are new beginnings. It's the beginning of a new lunar cycle. A new moon is when the sun and moon are conjunct. So just like other conjunctions, it's a restart or a reset point where we begin something new. So there's a new dance between the sun and moon that's beginning. The moon rules our internal landscape, our emotional landscape. Scorpio seeks to become intimate with and more connected to our emotional landscapes, our feelings, the way that we emote. Scorpio is a water sign, so it is connected to the moon, not directly, but it certainly, these two energies work together to bring us deeper into our emotional world. When we think about a new moon, it's when the moon goes dark. It's the dark void. It's the womb space. And it's an invitation for us to go inward into our own internal womb space, into our own underworld. We gain access to what's hidden. And Scorpio season in general is an opening into our subconscious. The evolutionary goal of Scorpio is to make the unconscious conscious. I talked a lot about this in the last episode, but the highest expression of Scorpio is the phoenix. It's this ability to transform, evolve, grow, to walk through fire and flame, to have that courage to dissolve and to become anew. Scorpio is transformation. It's death and rebirth. In its shadow, it sort of picks and chooses the ways in which it lives within that world. It's resistant to fully transform the ego. It does in many ways resist death. In its highest expression, it seeks intimacy with death. It leans into the processes of death and rebirth. It knows that the only way to the other side is through the flames and the fire of transmutation. When I see highly evolved Scorpios, I see the phoenix rising from the ashes. They're not afraid to go anywhere. They're not afraid to look at anything. And that is one of the most powerful forces on this planet. A Scorpio in their power is unstoppable because they're afraid of nothing. And as you probably know, if you either are a Scorpio or know Scorpios, that a Scorpio in its shadow is terrifying. It's one of the most destructive forces on the planet. We know there's a big difference between destruction and transmutation. Fear seeks to destroy. Love seeks to transform. And when we know the difference, we can never unsee it. We can never not feel it, not intuit it. But the only way to understand the frequency of fear, the only way to truly be able to see and recognize and sense fear in the world and in other people is when we create an intimacy with our own fear. When we have the courage to go into our own depths, our own shadow, the spaces and places where we hold fear, then we can sense it everywhere. A veil drops, a veil dissolves, and we all of a sudden are able to experience more love, more compassion, and less fear. And you develop a spidey sense, sort of this ability to sense fear in others, to sense fear in the world, and it becomes so repulsive that it's almost impossible to live at that frequency ever again. And I mean, fear is a part of life. It's a part of being human. It's not all bad. It's just that we have to create intimacy with it so that we understand it, we can sense it and feel it, and not let it hijack us. Fear keeps us safe in some ways. It activates our nervous system, which is able to keep us alive and survive. It brings us through the natural and normal processes of recognizing threat and getting us out of situations that are dangerous. But it can also create loops. It can create programs and patterns that keep us small and sort of shackled to the power of fear. And one of the biggest pieces and parts of this, and I've talked a lot about this on the podcast, but is our relationship with death. And that's one thing that I know is a major theme during Scorpio season. The veil is thin, and we're able to sense the other side more intimately. We're able to sense death and fear more intimately. And there's so much power in that. There's so much power in our ability to create a relationship with death, knowing that death is simply a process. It's a transformative process. I've always had such a fear of death, which is interesting because I have my sun and Mercury in the 12th house, and I have Pluto in my first house. So I know reckoning with and creating a relationship, a healthy relationship with death is something that I'm here to do and here to understand and sort of use as a evolutionary force in my life. But I've always held such fear around it, and not of my own death, but of death of those I love, of loss, really. And I will say that my relationship with death, as it's transformed, it has transformed my life. If you think about fears that we hold, when we hold a charge around a fear, when we have an attachment to a fear, or we have a fear that sort of runs our life in a certain way, it holds power over us. It keeps us from experiencing joy. It keeps us from experiencing expansion, potential, opportunity, happiness, pleasure, even love in some ways. So my fear of death held so much power over me throughout my life. And when I lost my dog, my soulmate dog, Arlo, last December, that process of sort of uncovering my attachment and my fear of loss and all of the energies that sort of were bonded us in some ways, but also kept me from truly experiencing his medicine, his love, his lessons. It transformed my life. He was such a great teacher for me throughout that. And even entering into the Scorpio season, I've noticed myself feeling more grief, feeling more of his absence and the loss that impacted me over the last year, or really few years, as I kind of started preparing myself for his crossing. But it has truly transformed me down to the cellular level. I'm not the person I was last year. I am more fortified in my belief, in my faith. I'm more resilient. I'm more confident and compassionate. And this is what the process of relating to death, creating intimacy with death can do. It can truly transform us. When we fear nothing, we become so authentic, so empowered. We become our truest, most authentic selves. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't have these fears that come forward or, respond to something with fear. It just means that we have to have awareness around what we fear and give it less power. And I think that's really what this moon is revealing to us, is where we hold fear, where we hold ourselves back due to fear, due to our own shadows, our own programs. I think especially with this interaction between Mars and Pluto during this moon, they actually oppose each other directly shortly after this new moon on November 3rd. So this moon is supercharged. It's a really powerful one. And like I said, it really allows us to see beyond the veil, to see what's hidden. Our own consciousness filters our experience. We're all psychic. We're all intuitive. That's something that I tell everyone I work with, and really as many people that will listen to me in life. But we all have the ability to sense the unseen, to create more relationship and intimacy with the unseen. It's really our own consciousness that filters it. Our subconscious creates blocks to the unseen. Our subconscious determines our veil. So I always tell people in psychic development, when I'm working with clients on psychic development, when I'm working with clients on developing and accessing their intuition, we must go within to clear the fear of the unknown, of the unseen. Our fears held within our subconscious block us from seeing what's beyond the veil. I truly believe as humans, we exist witnessing only a very small portion of what's actually occurring and unfolding around us. We talk about fairies and elemental beings, ghosts, Sasquatch, aliens, whatever you really want to, believe in or think about or explore. We only see what we want to see. We only see what we have access to based upon our conscious awareness. So maybe all of these things exist here right now on the physical plane, but we only see what's available to us. We only see what we're ready to see. And this is the work. If we want to know more, if we want to understand more, if we want to grow and evolve and expand, we have to begin within. We have to begin in our own basement to uncover the fears that keep us in a more narrow-minded consciousness. Sort of the same idea in neuroscience that we only use a small portion of our brain. There's so much potential for expansion, for understanding. And I believe here on this planet, we're using such a small portion of not only our consciousness and our mind's capability and capacity, but also our capacity for compassion and love and understanding and connection. And as we go into ourselves and uncover what's hidden within us, we're able to see the shadows in others through the lens of compassion, understanding, and love, rather than fear and hatred. And that's truly how we heal the world. Not saying it's easy, and not even saying that it's everyone's journey in this life to do that deep work. It's not, honestly. There are people that will never go as deep as you do. That has to be okay. And there will be people that go deeper than you, and that has to be okay too. We can only meet others as deeply as we've gone into our own selves. That's why there is such a divide. That's why so many people can't understand how someone else would have a different belief than them. Because it's scary to go within ourselves and ask that question. Every time I sort of get stuck or stubborn in a mindset or a belief, it's an indicator for me that there's something within myself I need to explore. And that doesn't mean I don't have beliefs and I don't have sort of stances that I have around certain things, but they're always evolving and they're always changing. But I know when I fail to have compassion for someone who has a belief different than mine, that there's something within myself that I'm avoiding, that I'm afraid to look at. We can only see what we want to see. And sometimes for certain people, that's okay. That's enough. I have a feeling if you're listening to this podcast, it's probably not enough for you. And I love you for that. So this moon is an opportunity to see what we might not want to keep our eyes and our hearts wide open to what we would normally resist, and to bring love and compassion to the parts that feel dark, the parts that we've hidden or rejected in the past. That's the portal through which transformation occurs. That's the heart work. That's how we become more whole, more integrated, and more evolved. When we carry our wounds from these boxes, from the basement up through the portal of the higher heart, to transform them into love, compassion, and grace, we become more free. We become more whole. and we become more authentic. It's when we reject and refuse to look at our shadows, to look at the spaces that are more dark within us, that we then lead with a closed heart. When we're unable to process our own shadow, we then project it onto others. That leads to disconnection, shame, fear, anger, and grief. I've said this a million times on this podcast, but the connection we so deeply crave with others, with the world, always begins. And that deep connection to self, the place where we birth beautiful connections with others, where we birth a healthy sense of self-worth and self-confidence, is formed through the integration of self, through loving and witnessing and choosing the parts that we oftentimes reject. Doesn't mean you have to like them. It means you have to understand them. Our shadow holds power over us when we're not able to look at it. And this time is so opportunistic. It's revealing to us where we have the opportunity to master our emotional landscape. When we lean in, when we go in, when we choose to bring the fat flashlight down into the basement, we become masters of our internal landscape, masters of our emotions. And that's really the work of Scorpio. Along the evolutionary wheel of the zodiac, it's here to teach us to integrate our intensity, to integrate our emotions, to connect more deeply, not only with ourselves, but with others. I saw something on Instagram recently where someone said Scorpio was lava. And I don't remember who it was. If you know, feel free to message me. I would love to credit that person because I can't find it now. But that's brilliant. That's exactly what it is. It's fiery liquid. It's intensity. It's like something that's subterranean under the surface that comes to the surface to transform. Can you withstand the heat? Now, this is not only about our own internal world and our own internal landscape, but also how we project that onto our relationships. As I said last week, I always find Scorpio in the 8th house interesting because we kind of leave the honeymoon phase of relating and enter into the shadow work, into the projection work, into the space of relating in a deeper way. Our attachment gets revealed, our attachment patterns and styles, and we begin to see things more clearly. And either we stick it out and we lean into the intensity. That's how really fortified relationships are formed, by leaning into the fear, not resisting or avoiding it, but leaning in, choosing each other, even when you're standing in a lava field and it feels so intense, but sticking it out and choosing connection over ego. So this is a big time of relational epiphanies. Such a powerful time to truly transform our relational framework. We've been doing such deep relational work since really 2020 with the South Node in Scorpio and then in Libra. And this is really a time of deep purging and cleansing. As I've also mentioned, the two co-rulers of Scorpio, Mars and Pluto, are opposing each other. They're doing this dance over the next 6 months. And this will also be a deeply transformative time. They're completing their dance for the last time in our lifetime in these signs. And in order to truly reap the benefits and the medicine of this transit, of these experiences, of these evolutionary openings and portals, we must be honest with ourselves. We must be willing to go into the internal basement and really examine why we're feeling what we're feeling, using emotions as data, as information, and as an invitation to go deeper, to not respond from the emotion, but to simply transmute when we go within to explore it more deeply. A big theme of this time, as Saturn completes its retrograde through Pisces, it goes direct on November 15th. And a big theme of this moon is clearing, avoidance, and illusion. This new moon is trine Saturn retrograding in Pisces. When Saturn shifts direct, it typically offers us a gift, either in the form of an opportunity, an epiphany. Saturn retrograde is a deep time of discipline, devotion. It's been retrograding since June. So wherever Pisces is in your chart, that's where you've been asked to level up, to mature, to refine, take ownership of something in your life or many things in your life. As we move out of this retrograde period, there will be awakenings and clarity that comes through that was not necessarily there before, or that we weren't able to unearth until now. Saturn has really been helping us cut through illusion, one of the shadow aspects of Pisces, as it's been retrograding. And with Saturn trining this new moon, it's giving it a little boost, a little extra lift or evolutionary support to reveal certain things. When two planets are trine, they're working together, they're supporting each other, they're in the same element. So a masculine planet like Saturn swimming through the waters of Pisces is bringing clarity to and structure to something that is oftentimes much more amorphous. Saturn might help this moon with creating structure, giving form to the formless, consciousness to what's unconscious. It's assisting us in revealing and understanding the transformative processes we're in and also what needs to be transformed, where we can still work with our shadow aspects. Saturn in Pisces is showing us where we are avoiding reality, where we're avoiding truth, where we're perhaps dissociating or fantasizing. Sometimes Saturn's truth can cut like a knife. It can be confronting and even cutting or biting. But sometimes we need that harshness to activate or initiate something within us to create the change that we need within our lives. And I truly believe, and this sort of ties into everything or weaves into everything, that we see what we need to when we're ready to. It so often happens with my clients that we are revealing these patterns or programs or wounds or beliefs. And we can say it over and over and over again, but one day it just clicks in. And I always love that point because they come to me and they're like, oh my gosh, this just downloaded, this just clicked in. I just came to this realization. I know we've been talking about it for weeks or months, but I wasn't able to see it until now. And that's exactly how this works. It works in layers. We have to process sometimes what's over top of these programs and patterns in the only way that feels good and right and safe for us. We all work on our own timeline. And once we start to dissolve the dissociation, the fog, the avoidance, the fear or the grief around these patterns, it's all of a sudden available to come through and up and into our consciousness in a way that we're able to grasp and to understand. It works the same for all of us. It works that way for me too. And we have to trust the timing, but really listen when it comes through fully. And this is something to remember as you relate to others during this time. It's such a supercharged time with the election here in the US. I know, we're obviously, I'm located in the US, but I know people are feeling this globally. There's unrest all over the world. There's war, genocide, abuse, and corruption happening every single day. And that's a lot to hold. So we have to remember when we're relating to others that each and every person has a different capacity. They can see only what they want to see. They can see only what they're able to see. Our ability to be fully awake to and aware of what's occurring around us is in direct correlation to our ability to lean into and face our fear. So this Scorpio season, this new moon in Scorpio, is an opportunity to begin again. to rewrite and rewire your experience with fear, with your shadow, to choose to go deeper, to understand ourselves more intimately, which enables us to understand others more intimately, and then to bring that light and awareness to the world in whatever way we're called to. The next few weeks will be intense as this Mars and Pluto opposition really activates fully on November 3rd. We'll be feeling the build up to that point all throughout this week. Friday might feel a little bit like a release valve, like something comes through your consciousness or your awareness, or there's sort of light or release that happens. But as we begin to near Mars's retrograde through Cancer and Leo, the intensity will continue to build. So it's a perfect time to become the masters of our internal world, our internal landscape, our emotional landscape, to become masters of the underworld and become leaders, mothers, fathers, friends, family members from that anchored sense of self. And I actually pulled 2 cards today. I pulled the Desert card from the Untamed Elemental deck. And this is all about adaptation. The desert can be unforgiving, but its extreme conditions shatter heavy concepts that might try to limit our light. His starkness and absence of shadows scrubs us of prescribed beliefs and elicit the drive to go inward for answers. Night skies offer a foil for the austerity of his endless expanse. He is a threatening terrain calling forth the self-sufficiency and adaptability of the desert flora and fauna. Vast and unpopulated desert is also a magnet for seekers of clarity, revelation, and purity. Desert's extreme climate forces you to adapt. There's often a gap between the recognition about a need for change and the perfect timing to initiate it. Change will come. Meanwhile, make yourself comfortable by working amicably with your circumstances. The benefits of doing so will extend beyond this window of time. Just as certain desert animals survive by burrowing into the earth or growing thick skins, your adaptation skills will open the door to lifelong satisfaction, no matter what's going on around you. When it's balanced, you feel adaptable, a sense of unshakable well-being. When it's imbalanced, you're fidgeting in your own skin, palpable discomfort until ideal circumstances are achieved. To bring into balance, surrender to your circumstances, the support will arise. And the next is the Praying Mantis card, and I feel like this really connects with a few people in particular, so if it's you, I'd love to hear from you. And this is all about meditation. Difficult to spot as she rests in the leaves, Praying Mantis is revered for her ability to remain still. When she does move, she steps deliberately. Nothing is done without intuitive verification, which assures her safety and success. In this way, Praying Mantis communes with otherworldly modalities of truth. In her world, the unforeseen does not exist. Rooted in the stillness of her rumination, she remains open and certain, a prophet of tranquility. Praying Mantis appears when the medicine of meditation is most required. The more complex life gets, the more you will benefit from the truth offered by your inner sage. The price for this wisdom is to immerse yourself in the calm waters that exist beneath the waves of worldly distractions. Make peace for the voice within to speak. Praying Mantis will guide you towards stillness and clarity. This is her territory. When it's balanced, she's or you are informed by internal wisdom. When it's imbalanced, frenetically driven by the ebb and flow of the outer world. To bring into balance, find stillness and meditation. Thank you for being here, for tuning in, for listening, for opening yourself into this journey, this wisdom, this information that can sometimes be confronting. So many of you are true alchemists and do not resist the underworld, so I appreciate you. Thank you for doing the work to change the world. Thank you, as always, for sharing these episodes, when you share with a friend or you share on social media, it truly means the world. It also really helps the podcast, and I just appreciate it so much. I'll be hosting a full moon workshop on November 15th, so be on the lookout for that. I also have my discount codes for Katori Life Jewelry, Pound Jewelry, and the red light box that I use every day. It really helps with inflammation. It helps with sleep and rest. It really helps me with my circadian rhythm when I use it at night. And then as we begin to receive less availability to sunlight, I use it in the mornings. I love it so much. So that's linked as well in the show notes. As always, take what resonates, leave what does not. Thank you for your courage and your presence. And I'm wishing you a beautiful week and happy new moon.